don't mess up their benefits at all, and we make sure there is some consistency.
I call Jan Logan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm pleased to rise to join this conversation as well around the detail of this bill, which, as we've stated before, the Green Party isn't supporting. It's quite difficult to speak to this part of the bill because there are so many points to make in relation to it, all of which feel very important and quite substantive. So I'm going to try and limit myself, which is going to be difficult. I'd just like to pick up on some of the comments that the Minister's made and speak a little bit to the idea of the wraparound service, which sounds fantastic. You know, it sounds like a really good thing to get alongside young people and connect and help them build on their strengths to be able to achieve their potential, which is, you know, that model of youth development that we've learnt over time is effective. The problem is that this bill is based on a deficit model. It's identifying young people who are on varying degrees of the scale of being at risk. Whereas the strength-based model that this whole sector has spent years developing is not, it's recognised that when we focus on the risk, we actually develop the risk. When we focus on the strengths, we build the strengths. And we need to be working with each young person where they are at and be building trust and relationships, because that's, and giving young people things to do that they can do. They are the things that make a difference in youth development. This bill, by setting the point of NCEA level 2, this bill by requiring those community providers to report on the young people, potentially resulting in sanctions, undermines trust and relationship. This bill, by defining young people on degrees of risks, undermines the analysis of strength-based development. And I'll speak a little bit more to the NCEA Level 2 challenge, and particularly I would like to challenge the concept that all of the evidence tells us that NCEA Level 2 is the point that makes a difference. When I was trying to get the evidence to show me that, because, you know, I do believe in checking out and making sure my assumptions aren't wrong. So I asked to try and find the evidence around that and whether it was school-based NCEA Level 2 or NCEA Level 2 outside of school. And it seems to me that the evidence is based on school, because when you step outside of that school system, it becomes a hodgepodge of unit standards that don't even guarantee that basic literacy and numeracy has been achieved. It could be a completely random collection of educational points that don't create a comprehensive pattern of learning. And the comprehensive pattern of learning and development is what makes the difference. And, you know, I've seen some of the educational providers and some of the outcomes for young people who are working in that system, and it's not rigorous. So for those young people who are up to it, that's not going to be actually being aspirational for them at all. For those young people, and I don't believe that every young person, that it's for us to strive for them, when I hear from young people who have been refugees, who have never been to school before they came to New Zealand at, say, the age of 13, who don't even have reading or writing in their own first language. Their response to the idea of NCEA Level 2 and them being helped to strive to achieve that was just No. Because that's actually overwhelming. Mr. Speaker.
Jan Logie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And demotivating. Whereas good teaching is based on a student-centred approach. We develop the strengths and the aspirations for those young people from where they're at. And that's not about making assumptions. That's not about characterising them and not expecting enough for them in the world. That's just good practice. And this bill undermines that good practice. I also have concerns around so many things. The human rights. I'll just touch on this briefly. And this bill undermines, breaches human rights in terms of age, in terms of marital status, in terms of several other points around gender and employment status. Now, there have been conflicting views around this. Some people have said, well, that's justified because the end goal of getting people into work justifies that breach of human rights. The minister, when there was a criticism by the UN body on economic, social and cultural rights, said, well, if the committee had seen the detail of the bill, they wouldn't have had that criticism. The problem was that the committee had seen the detail of the bill in the draft form. So to stand up and say there aren't breaches of human rights in this is actually saying this government's perspective holds primacy over the UN committee's perspectives. It holds primacy over the Human Rights Commission's perspective. It holds primacy over the Children's Commission's perspective. It holds primacy over so many organisations whose daily bread is human rights. And that, to me, seems arrogant. And I believe that human rights are important. And I don't believe this House should be undermining people's human rights blithely without exceptionally good reason. And I don't believe that this bill has anything behind it that comes anywhere near exceptionally good reason. I'd also just like to speak briefly to our SOP, which is to extend the training incentive allowance and bringing that back in there, because currently level 4 and above isn't eligible for the training incentive allowance. And, you know, when the government talks about the answer to child poverty being getting parents off the DPB and getting them into work, you know, it sounds reasonable. But when the evidence shows us that one of the best ways of keeping people off the benefit, particularly women, is that level 4 and above study, and the government isn't willing to actually fund that and include that in the bill, then we really have to question the integrity of this approach. So we're asking the government to reconsider that, to actually extend it back up to that degree level courses, because we know those higher paid jobs actually give women that flexibility in terms of their employment that makes it so much easier for them to stay in employment and look after their kids, because we know that higher paid jobs are more likely to have those support mechanisms around them. So, I'll end my speech there. We just encourage the government to consider the underlying principles, reconsider the underlying principles of this bill, and get back to the things that will make a difference.
I call Tim McIndoe.
Thank you, Mr.